Hello and welcome. This is the 9th Social Media Power Talk. We're in September and the year seems to have flown by. And today we're discussing two very key components of social media marketing. We're discussing gamification and design. Until now, those two things have been sort of relegated to the back burner because they're the things which are nice to have, but not obviously necessary. And this is not the case any longer. To discuss them with me today, I have two superb guests. I have Dustin Stout from Dustin TV. He's a CEO of his own company. And I have Christopher Voggelman, who is, according to him, dictator for life. And he works for Epic Win Systems. Okay, I'm going to...
Benevolent dictator.
Okay, I think that's a great quantification to have. Benevolent dictators are probably very rare on this planet, and we probably have one with us today. So we're going to set it off, and I'm going to ask Christopher first of all to introduce himself a little bit and tell us a little bit about gamification. How does that work in marketing in very broad strokes, and how he sees it developing? So Christopher, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, David. I'm very pleased to be here, particularly with you and with Dustin, who I'm a big fan of both of you. Gamification is something that's been around for centuries, and it's not terribly complex to understand. When they hear the word gamification, people often think of video games, but this isn't World of Warcraft or anything along those lines. What we're really talking about are using the psychological principles or the motivational triggers that make games so incredibly addictive and immersive, and layering those into non-game situations. So even though people may not recognize it, these types of principles have been around for many, many years. For example, a simple thing like the leaderboard that you might see in a sales organization, that's an example of gamification. It's the principle where people can level up or level down, and it doesn't require anything technical necessarily. It can be as simple as a whiteboard and a pen.
Okay.
So, if people think of gamification, they think points or badges or leaderboards, but what they refer to as the PBL type of approach is rather primitive. I mean, you've seen that, for example, in Foursquare, in a number of different programs where people earn badges, you get to be the mayor of a particular town or what have you, and those types of things actually have kind of a short lifespan. For example, the points and badges and things within Foursquare actually have maybe a 3 to 4 month period of time when they work really, really well, and then the engagement tends to drop off. So gamification is just simply a way of modifying or guiding behavior, and you'll have to initially determine what types of behaviors do you really want from your audience or from your customers.
Fantastic, that's really good. And I think with that introduction, actually, we can go to Dustin, because part of what you said, Christopher, has to do also with design, because that is also an aspect of behavior modification. But let's have Dustin, if you would mind coming in and introducing yourself, and just tell us a little bit about how design works in marketing, gamification even, and behavior modification.
Yeah, well, I'm a designer by trade. I also consult in the area of social media marketing. I work with a great company called Steady Demand. We do specifically Google Plus marketing, and I have had the pleasure of helping a lot of clients build websites, design visual campaigns. I do a lot of brand identities, so I work in the visual space a lot, and I think where we're at today in our evolution of the digital world is very interesting. The idea of visual content has caught on very fast in the last year and a half, and the reason for that, I think, was really nailed down by one of Google's own chief design people. I forget her actual title, but she wrote an article on Medium that was very brilliant, talking about the evolution of cars and how at first, the car industry was very functional. They weren't very beautiful. I mean, they were just really trying to nail down the function of a car, and the concept was so earth-shattering and paradigm shifting from the way things were that the form factor wasn't important. It was just the fact that this new thing called a car existed, and so as we evolved into making that a daily part of our lives, more companies started popping up, more cars started popping up. The functionality of it all became very easy, or at least became the norm. So it was hard to differentiate between what's the better car, and they fought with features, but eventually the form factor came in, and that became the differentiating factor. And now you see the cars are a work of art, and that's kind of where the internet sits today. Is we got the function out of the way. You can have a brand new website up and running in less than 5 minutes, thanks to WordPress and Joomla and Drupal and all these content management systems. But the form factor is the differentiator. It's how you stand apart from the crowd. It's how you delight your audience, and that's kind of where I come in. And I think just along with gamification, it's all about the experience of it. And I tend to think of visuals as just another communication medium. So if you're communicating to your audience in a way that stimulates them both visually, intellectually, and gives them a delightful experience, they're going to stick with you much, much longer.
That's fascinating, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the fact that both of you seem to do two things which are very different from each other, and yet they're informed by very similar dynamics. So let's take the question now to Christopher, and let's discuss, how does somebody start on gamification?
Well, there's some very, very easy ways to start. There are a number of websites out there like gamification.co. Gabe Zickerman, who's a friend of mine, sort of is the grand master or the godfather of gamification. And you can get videos from the events. There are YouTube videos. There are all kinds of different things out there. There are books on gamification. Gabe has issued some. Jesse Schell has some on the power of transformational games. If you just search gamification within Amazon, you'll see at least 25 different references there. The other way of doing it, too, is to have some sort of experience in gamification. And I happen to, I've put together, along with some friends, a card deck. And we actually use a card deck which talks about the victories, the game mechanics, the social mechanics, and we just go, I have people just do these things periodically just to play with these items, because not all game mechanics will work in all situations. You can actually alienate an audience depending upon what type of mechanic that you're using. And I give the example of, say at the bingo parlor, you think that Mildred, Ethel, and Marge are going out there on Friday night to win big, but in reality, their reason for going to the bingo parlor actually may be affiliation or the desire for social interaction. And the same thing holds true when you're looking at in the online world. You have to look at an avatar, think about what are the characteristics of the person you're trying to attract, and then discern from that what are the behaviors, just maybe 2 or 3 behaviors that you might want to have. If your main goal is to get them to push the yellow button to add to cart, then that's one behavior you might want to look at. If your goal is to get someone to share your content with their friends through Twitter or Facebook or Google Plus or any other type of social media, then you will reward them accordingly. And people, the one thing about gamification to realize is that people will respond far more to status and recognition than they ever will to any sort of monetary reward. So when people try to give discount coupons or incentives or buy this now, that may not be the reason why people are actually visiting your website. And I know that delight is one of those things that Dustin just talked about. You need to have some surprise, some serendipity, and you need to get that dopamine circulating in your prospect.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. I think you brought up quite a few elements here, including the delight that the audience has to have and serendipity. And I think when it comes to design also, these are emotional trigger points that designers always try to actually perfect and strike. So Dustin, if I bring you in, because you are usually in the hot seat when you get a client, they come to you and you have to discuss design with them. How do you start? What's the starting point?
Well, for me, the starting point is always, who are you trying to reach? And that seems to be the most difficult part, is because most business owners, whether they're a startup or they've been around for a few years or a decade, it seems like the most difficult point is always trying to nail down who exactly that audience is. And I feel like a lot of business owners, myself included, at the beginning, were very lazy, and we want to appeal to the widest audience. We want to say, oh, my product is for everyone, male and female, ages 5 to 95. The problem is you can't market to 9 to 95 or 5 to 95. You have to understand who it is you're talking to, and
Can I just interrupt here, Justin, because what you just said, I've heard time and again from designers when people come in and they give them the broadest possible spectrum and they expect a lot of the times design to work for everybody. So
Right.
really the question is to you, how do you guide a client?
Well, I talk about what problem is they're solving, and I try to identify in them where that problem began for them, because a lot of times business owners are creating a product or a service because they had a problem or they had a passion. So wherever that passion for them began or started, that's usually the best way to identify who the audience is. And from there we start to talk about psychology. Okay, if we have this audience down, we know who we're targeting. What is it this type of person loves? What is it this type of person gets excited about? Depending on the age, they might like warmer colors or cooler colors. So we want to incorporate that. Depending on the gender, they may like a typeface that's a little more flowy or a little more straight edge and straightforward. So it really comes down to understanding who it is we're communicating to, and that's really all it is. I don't think of what I do as like an artist painting a picture. I think about it as someone crafting a speech. Much like you're writing a book. You're writing it to communicate to someone, and I just happen to do that in a very visual way.
That's fantastic. That's really good. And
I think we do have the same approach, actually, because we're both trying to get the psychological profile of the customer, and then we go from that common ground into different directions, eventually to intersect once again.
Absolutely.
And isn't that a challenge, really? Because I think we have gone from a time when we used to be very confident in our marketing in terms of who we targeted. We used to work with I remember before the in the 90s we had marketing personas who were really convinced that we knew who they were because we had spent a lot of money as a company, got focus groups to come back and told us this is what it is, this is what our customers like, and then every bit of marketing was very specifically and very confidently addressed to the needs or perceived needs of those marketing personas. And we know today this is not the case. You can get a person who on Monday likes one thing and on Tuesday, completely hates it because something else has changed in their life. So really, you can't market in the same rigid way anymore, which is, I suspect, the finer elements of the psychological approach actually come in. So the question here is, how do you actually create something which is a little bit more robust and sustainable, at least in the short term, if not the long term? Christopher?
Wow. This reminds me very much of internet marketing, of split testing. You throw out a sales letter and another sales letter, A and B, and you compare them to each other. There is no exact formula as to how to do this. It's a lot of trial and error, which reminds me of when I was selling pharmaceuticals. You could give the same drug to 5 different people and get 5 different reactions to it. So the challenge with human beings is they're full of variables. And you have to be prepared at any time, willing to switch over and switch up your techniques. You can throw out something very simple like a point or a badge system, or just the leaderboard system is pretty interesting, and see if people respond to it. But it's lots of trial and error. It really is. You can design, once you really know what particular behaviors are after, then you can design the platform accordingly. For example, if you want to have your video shared by other people, you would put a particular game mechanic in there rewarding them for sharing it on social media. You might create a structure where you will reward someone commenting on your blog. And you may reward someone for watching your video in its entirety, not just the first 15 seconds. Once you have a structure in place, you can actually do a lot of, I mean, it's real-time metrics. You can get a real-time feedback loop going. That's a little more complicated. That's the stuff that I'm working on currently. But if you just introduce just a couple of small game elements into your platform, into your book, for example, or into anything that you want to promote, you test and you see. I used to sell this amount of books or audio tapes. And now, after I put this badge system in here, I now sell X number, which is most likely plus 10 to 15%. So it really depends on what you want to measure. Some people want to measure dollars. Other people want to measure the amount of interaction. Some people want to measure the amount of time someone's on a web page. And someone may simply want to measure how many times does someone come back to my page every single day. And in a good gamified site, you'll have people coming 10, 11, 12 times a day to your website because they're looking for the surprise, the delight. They're competitive, or they're trying to achieve a degree of mastery, or they have some need perhaps for identity or a sense of meaning and belonging to your tribe. So it's very psychological. I mean, it really, the whole process of gamification or engagement, emotional engagement, is to draw people in, retain their loyalty, and ultimately, from a business standpoint, sell them more goods and services. Or if you're a political campaign, get them to volunteer more hours for your candidate.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. And, you know, pretty much all the things which you said is also something which design has been asked to do since we've ever had design to talk about. The thing which I usually see when I take part in these conversations, and I'm going to address this question to Justin now, is that most people who come to ask a designer to do something for them already have some preconceived notions of their own, and some of them even, and this is, you know, even big clients, you know, in the corporate world, try to use a designer as a paintbrush to realize their vision rather than taking the designer's expertise and skill, and which is what they're paying for, on board. So Dustin, how do you deal with that, and how do you guide them in the right direction?
Well, it's difficult because that type of a client or customer, when they are trying to use you sort of as their outlet or as their paintbrush or as their medium to get something visual that they're trying to accomplish, I have very strict guidelines that I've set up for myself. My book of work and my career as a designer, I put a lot at stake with every client that I work with, and if ever I find that a client and I are on two different ends of the spectrum, or if we are at odds at what we believe is the right choice, I have no problem telling them that they need to find another designer. And this has happened several times, and it's not to fault the client in most cases. It's not to fault them, it's just they have a different vision, and it's their baby, and it's their, you know, they are so consumed with the way that they see it that sometimes they can't always accept another perspective. But what I usually try to do is I tend to be very communication oriented. So not just visually, but I try to explain all the design choices. I'll explain the psychology of why I think the color pink is the wrong color for a male audience. You know, I'll explain why a frilly typography may potentially repel a larger you know, male audience, or you know, vice versa, why a gritty, grungy you know, guns and western might repel a large majority of the female audience. So I'll try to explain every single choice that I make, right down to the typography and why the lines on the typography are better for this website or better for this sizing. I'll also explain why this version of the logo is much better than a much more complicated version of the logo. Yeah, I try to very intentionally articulate why those choices are made, and that typically guides them down the path of understanding. And we can usually come to a compromise much quicker as long as I am intentional at explaining. And a big peeve of mine is when designers are unable to explain their choices. Right. And that's you know, us as artists, you know, we just kind of do things because we think they look good or feel good. And
Yeah.
in the business world, that
Yeah.
doesn't fly. You need to make intelligent choices.
Exactly.
And I try to do that with every one of my clients. Let them know this is why I did this.
That's brilliant. That's very good. Okay, let's ask a couple of questions now. It's a little bit more practical in approach. Let's begin with Christopher. And suppose, Christopher, somebody wakes up tomorrow and he says, I've got a great website. It has quite a lot of traffic, and I'm ready to take it to the next level of gamification for my audience. What should they start with in order to take that first step? I mean, it's a big question, I know.
You can start with some sort of a contest or a challenge or competition. That's often really stimulates people. And granted, you don't have to give away a lot, but a contest often dangles something like maybe the new iPad or the iPhone 6 or whatever it is out there as a carrot for people to respond. So contests are a good way of starting with basic gamification. People love to play games. I mean, you could even do a version of a scratch-off lotto ticket if you wanted to. Like, match these 5 numbers and win a chance to spend 15 minutes with David Amerland at a local pub. That's a possibility that exists. So it may not cost you a lot of money, although some people will argue you should never give away your own services as the prize. But if you just allow people to have access to something that someone else might not, that could create something very simple. Just a contest. Share this video with 5 of your friends and win a chance to, I can't figure it out, but whatever the goal is, win a chance to spend time with David Amerland's G Plus pillow.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
But he'll send you a pillow. You could actually you could send those pillows. I mean, they're probably $26 or $34. Invest $34 in your business and send out a pillow for whoever puts the greatest number of tweets out there. You can send a little Twitter pillow. And the cost is minimal, but the engagement is maximal.
Yes, and here's a question now based on that, and this is addressed to both of you. Both gamification and design are there to touch on emotional touch points from the audience point of view and achieve something very specific for the business owner. Isn't this, to some degree, manipulative? And let's start with Dustin, please.
It can be. It can be extremely manipulative. But if you think about what we're trying to do with communication, even as a speaker, an analyst, we're trying to convey a message. That's at its very basic principle. And understanding human emotion, understanding psychology, understanding how someone interprets things. We're always trying to find ways to make that message clear to them, and we're manipulating our own words. We're manipulating how we think about things in order to communicate them to a certain person. And what the good side, or the not dark side of the marketing world, you're really just trying to get them to experience and feel what you feel about the product. I mean, in its purest form, in a perfect world, you love your product, and you really truly believe it can benefit those who use it or who buy it or who take part in it. And you have to find a way to get them to feel what you feel. And in a sense, that is manipulation, because you are causing a reaction from them.
Yes.
But is that a negative thing? No, not in all instances. I mean, when Walt Disney sat down to write a story, or to map out a story, he didn't begin by saying to himself, how can I manipulate these people into buying my movie? Yes. No, he thought to himself, how can I tell a story that puts a smile on people's face? And that's manipulation, I guess, because you are causing someone's emotions or someone's feelings or someone's psyche to have a reaction.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be if used for the dark side of the force, I suppose.
Okay, and the same question now to Christopher, even more so.
The very word manipulation implies some evil intent.
Yes.
And if we were to substitute the word influence, that has less of a negative intent. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that I've worked with gamification is people think, well, isn't that just behavior modification? I said, well, yeah, it's behavior modification. I changed it to behavioral guidance, and suddenly people were all, they're fine if you're guiding behavior. God forbid you manipulate behavior. But we influence everyone on a regular basis. That's how we get married. It's how we are able to make a sale. It's how we're able to have a good job interview. Are you manipulating your employer to get a job? Maybe, if you really don't have the skills necessary to fulfill the requirements of that job. So I think
just ask something, Christopher, because I think you brought up, both of you have brought up really good points here, and really, my question is, fantastic, we guide and we influence people. How do we remain authentic in that guidance and influence? Because ultimately, the intent of all this is to have a successful business, and ultimately, that the subtext to that is whatever the cost. So how do we square that circle?
Well, this is where ethics and your core values come in. For example, one of the team members I'm actually looking to hire worked for another gamification company, and they deliberately turned down any site that dealt in pornography because it went against their ethos. Because you take something that's already addictive like pornography and you layer on points, badges, leaderboards, and incentives, that's going to be very dangerous. And so in terms of authenticity, you need to have your set of values squared away. And you have to be, just like Dustin was saying earlier, you have to be willing to turn away a client.
Right. And Dustin, same question to you. How do you remain authentic within that? And I know you started already explaining this but let's clarify this a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I guess it really depends on your values. For me, the most valuable asset that I will ever own is my integrity, and that's just how I approach life. That's how I approach all my relationships, with integrity, because once your integrity is gone, I mean, what else do you really have? So ethics, integrity is really what keeps you on the right path. I mean, some people, they have a higher power that they have to answer to. I myself, I believe that I have somebody else higher than me who I have to answer to when this life is gone. So that keeps me on the right track, and I think everybody needs to find something that says this is who I am, this is where my values lie, this is the line that I do not cross, and stick to it. Fantastic. And integrity and trustworthiness are two of the most valuable things you can ever possess for your business and for your life. So lead always with integrity, and that will keep you authentic.
Brilliant. We have a couple of comments, and unfortunately, Comment Tracker isn't playing ball today, but we've got Cyril Deuce on the stream who says, "Aren't we all looking to present ourselves in the best possible way? Does that make us all manipulative?"
It makes us all human.
Exactly, okay. And we've got also Amon Johns, and he says, "I prefer guide even to influence. Guide is more like advice, less like hypnotic control." It's got a point, maybe.
Well, maybe. I mean, I used to teach hypnosis to doctors years ago, so guide sometimes can also have the connotation that you're guiding the cattle down the chute towards the slaughter. But we'd like to think you have better intention than that.
Yeah, I think at some point this conversation turns into merely a semantics exercise, and we can argue semantics all day long. Really, what good marketing is about is understanding what language your audience relates to, which one best suits them. And if somebody were to say, "Here, let me guide you down this path," I would have that reaction of feeling like a sheep, and I don't want to feel like a sheep. But if I'm influenced, it gives me the perspective of somebody has an authority level, or that speaks more to me. But again, understanding your audience is key, and how you use words.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. And with that, we almost reached the end of our hangout on air. It went really quickly. A lot more. I've got a lot more questions to ask both of you. So maybe at some point in the future, we can both of you can come back, and we'll tackle a few more things. But let's have closing statements. Let's begin now with Dustin first, please. Dustin, if your closing statements about design and customers and clients and approach.
Yeah. My mantra always is simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Visual communication is just as important as verbal communication. If your verbal communication is cluttered, unclear, without direction, your audience will be unclear and without direction. So lead from a place of simplicity and that.
Go from there. Awesome. That's really good and easy to remember. And Christopher,
I
what
would
was
say
your
just
thought?
simply to use tools very carefully. Use them with purpose that's in harmony with your ethics and your core values, and stimulate the emotions of your clients such that you can retain their undying loyalty.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. And with that, we've reached the end of the 9th Social Media Today Power Talk. We talked about gamification, we talked about design in marketing, and we ended up talking about very core, basic human values. We're talking about trust, integrity, authenticity, how to keep it real, and maintain that kind of contact, which actually allows trust to develop. There's going to be another one next month. We're going to have 2 female guests. They're surprise guests, so just keep on checking the page, and you'll find out. This is David Amerland signing out. Thank you very much.